Tomorrow morning the sun will come up. You have never ever once doubted that. It's the most reliable fact in your entire life, the quiet foundation that every other plan you have ever made sits on top of. But there was a year when it came up wrong, and nobody alive could explain why. In the spring of 536, people across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia stepped outside and found the sun had gone dim. Not for an afternoon, not for a week, but for 18 months. It still rose, it still set. It just stopped giving light the way a sun is supposed to. A Byzantine historian named Procopius was alive to see it. He wrote that the sun gave off its light without brightness, like the moon, for that entire year. He said it looked like the sun during an eclipse, except the eclipse never ended. In Italy, a Roman statesman named Cassiodorus was trying to run a functioning government through it. His letters read like a man slowly losing his grip on reality. He describes a blue sun, a moon stripped of its glory, frost in the middle of summer. He wrote that the seasons had been all jumbled together into one, and that fruit hardened on the branch instead of ripening. Think about what that actually meant for him. He had no satellites, no telescopes, no word for what was happening. He was one of the best educated men in Europe, watching the sky quietly break, and the only explanation available to him was that something had gone wrong with the world itself. In China, chroniclers recorded snow falling in August. Crops died standing in the fields. In Ireland, the annals recorded it with brutal simplicity. A failure of bread. But then it got worse. Because dim light is not just an unsettling thing to look at. Dim light is a food problem. Plants need photons. Take away even a fraction of them for 2 growing seasons and the wheat comes up thin. The barley comes up short, and the grain that does survive never fills out. Tree rings recorded all of it. A Swiss researcher named Ulf Böttgen led a study that pulled together thousands of rings from trees across the Alps and the Altai mountains and found something that made people's blood run cold. The summers after 536 were the coldest in more than 2,000 years. Not the coldest decade in living memory, but the coldest since before the pyramids at Giza had settled into the sand. And it did not stop at 1 year. There was another eruption in 540, another in 547. The cold stacked. Böttgen's team gave it a name that sounds almost too dramatic to be real. The Late Antique Little Ice Age. A century and a quarter of a colder world, starting with that one strange summer. Now think about what a starving population is. It is a population with weakened immune systems, crowded into cities, moving grain over long distances to wherever grain still exists. In 541, a ship reached the Egyptian port of Pelusium carrying something in its hold. Fleas, on rats, carrying a bacterium called Yersinia pestis. What followed is now called the Plague of Justinian, and it swept through the Eastern Roman Empire like a scythe. Procopius, the same man who had described the dim sun 5 years earlier, now described bodies piling up faster than anyone could bury them in Constantinople. The estimates vary wildly, but some suggest it killed a third of the population it touched. The Emperor Justinian had spent his entire reign on one enormous ambition. He wanted to put the Roman Empire back together. He had generals in Italy. He had generals in North Africa. He was, by some measures, actually winning. He caught the plague himself, and he survived it, though his empire did not recover. The reconquest stalled, the money ran out, the soldiers stopped coming, and the door that had been briefly opened, the one where a unified Rome walks back into history, closed for good. So what did it? What actually dimmed the sun? For over 1,000 years, nobody knew. It was one of the strangest unsolved problems in history. A worldwide event described independently by people who had never met and never could have coordinated, with no cause anyone could find. The answer came out of a glacier. High in the Swiss Alps, there is a saddle of ice called Constantinople. Snow has been falling there and compressing into layers for 2,000 years, and every one of those layers holds a sample of the atmosphere on the day it fell. A team led by Paul Majewski at the University of Maine drilled a course straight down through it. And then a historian named Michael McCormick at Harvard did something that historians do not usually get to do. He read the ice like a document. The core was analyzed with a laser that could sample slices of ice thinner than a human hair, giving month-by-month resolution instead of decade by decade, and in the layer corresponding to the very start of 536, they found it. Volcanic glass. Microscopic shards, chemically fingerprinted, matching rock from Iceland. A volcano had erupted in the far north, and it threw a veil of sulfuric aerosol into the upper atmosphere, where no rain could wash it out. That veil spread across the northern hemisphere and reflected sunlight back into space for a year and a half. Every farmer in Europe and every chronicler in China was standing underneath the same invisible thing, describing it in their own language, having no idea the others existed. McCormick has said plainly that 536 was the beginning of one of the worst periods to be alive, if not the worst year. And here's the part that startles people. The same ice core recorded the recovery. Lead pollution from smelting silver disappears from the record after 536 because nobody was mining anything. It stays gone for 100 years, and then around 640 the lead comes back. Economies restart, coins get minted, people build again. The ice remembered the collapse and it remembered the healing, and no human being alive during either one knew that anything was being written down. So what do you do with that? You live inside a system you cannot see the edges of. You assume the harvest arrives. You assume the shelves refill. You assume, without ever once articulating it, that the atmosphere above you will keep behaving the way it has behaved every single day you have been alive. That is not arrogance. It is the only way a mind can function. You cannot run a life while continuously modeling the failure of the sky. But it is worth knowing that the assumption is an assumption. The people of 536 were not primitive. They were not careless. Cassiodorus was writing sophisticated administrative correspondence while the sun was blue. They were doing everything right, and a mountain in Iceland that none of them had ever heard of quietly rewrote the next 100 years of their lives, and the cause did not become known to anyone until 2018. They lived their entire lives inside an event they could not name. There's no reason to think you're exempt from that. Somewhere right now there's a process running, geological or biological, or something with no category yet, and the ice or the rings or the sediments is recording it faithfully, and nobody will read that record for another 1500 years. So tomorrow morning the sun will come up. It will be bright. It will be ordinary. And you will not think about it for even a second. Which is exactly what everyone thought in the spring of 535.